Hey look, it's Pompoko, that movie where Tanuki used their testicles to fight, haha. It's a novelty that wears off though from being real. It's actually a part of Japanese mythology, so it's not like it's a weird artistic decision or something. I'll keep this one brief because I don't have much to say about it. This is Takahata's weakest film while working at Ghibli, but that's understandable, since while he usually goes for grounded realism, this movie is noticeably more cartoonish. The animation is the best part, super smooth and super energetic, fitting with the film's tone. The soundtrack is great too, and I really like the ending. It's an incredibly challenging perspective on environmentalism. It's a great celebration of Japanese culture, and that's where my praises stop. This film shares a lot of the issues I have with The Wind Rises. The characters, while energetic, are still very bare bones, so that doesn't really mean anything. The conflict is not really pronounced, we only see risk and consequence during the last act, and man is this story all over the place. There's a million and one different side stories which only end up needlessly elongating the movie. We absolutely didn't need a side plot with the kitsune, or I think there's a forbidden romance somewhere. That's the thing, the last time I saw this movie was 2 months ago, and yet my memory of it is far worse than films I saw once 3 years ago. For the majority of the movie, my emotional state of being was I just didn't expect this to somehow be more interesting than The Wind Rises, during which I felt the same. This one just had more personality, and a decent ending. When I rewatched When Marnie Was There, for the first half or so, I was kind of pissed off. Neither Anna nor Marnie, the main characters, are interesting to me. Marnie, let's start with her, is this perfect human who's completely amazing and can do no wrong. Anna is suffering from asthma, and her adoptive guardian thinks sending her on a vacation to a place with clearer air is the best idea. The asthma is only there so that the character can come into this magical new place and it's not brought up afterwards. Her defining trait, and really her only trait, is her depression/anxiety. Now let me just clarify here. I suffered from depression in the past. I still take medication for it. My position was abysmal. Even then, I wasn't gloomy 24/7 like Anna is here. When I said it's her only trait, I meant it. This isn't actual depression, this is movie depression. Plus, she's supposed to be 12. She doesn't look like a 12-year-old, she doesn't act like a 12-year-old, her emotional struggles don't fit a 12-year-old. There's a part when an adult man cheekily gives her wine. She's not even close to finishing puberty. She should have been 16. The lack of decent characters is a big issue. When you have two characters with only one character trait, and you want to have a scene that's deeply romantic between them, it will always end up forced. It's especially bad since Marnie is this mysterious being, supposedly living in a house that should be abandoned. Anna just never asks Marnie any questions. It was so forced that I felt like I was watching The Cat Returns again, hence me saying at the beginning of this segment, I was pissed off. It's not the only issue too. This film's ending is really weird. Some people might have seen it as unintentionally gross, but I don't feel that way. I just thought it's a very strange reveal for the story to have, especially since it's supposed to initiate some character growth in Anna. I don't understand how. It's also explained through very clumsy exposition. Despite the flaws of the second half, I like it more than the first one, and it's because I realize the big strength the film has: atmosphere. This film's animation is super good, incredibly smooth, and with a wide range of beautiful colors to really make the environment stick out. It's colors that I associate in my mind automatically with melancholy, which fits since, Anna is depressed. This film also does a really good job of blurring the lines between what's real and what isn't. My opinion of Anna not asking questions turned from "this is clearly just so the story could happen" to "Anna likes Marnie so much she doesn't even care if she's real or not." There's also Anna waking up and you don't know if what she saw was real and some mysterious force made her pass out, or if what she saw was actually a dream. The feelings of melancholy and mystery complement each other perfectly here and create this unique aura that I can't say any other film has except Mysterious Skin. But it's a weird movie to compare this to. Also, Sayaka is what every side character in anything should be like. Simple yet memorable, and feels like a real person. I still don't think this is a particularly good movie. The flaws I mentioned still stand, and they are pretty big ones, but I warmed up to it. Also, remember when people thought this would be Ghibli's final film? Yeah, Miyazaki announced his retirement a year prior. After this movie's debut, they said they're temporarily halting production, but people thought, oh, it means they're done. Ghibli probably knew they can't rely on Yonebayashi, this movie's director, and Goro. They seemingly only came back because Miyazaki came back. So that's cool, anyway, let's move on. This is one of the studio's most critically acclaimed, most beloved, most recognizable films. Despite this, there still seems to be a small undercurrent of people that will agree with me when I say this isn't a top-tier Ghibli movie, from the nostalgia critic to Roger Ebert himself. The big reason among these people seems to be how messy it is in terms of storytelling. I wholeheartedly agree. Howl's Moving Castle is based off of a novel by the same name, and the messiness comes from the changes made from the novel and why. Miyazaki originally didn't even want to make this movie. It was going to be given to the director of Digimon the movie, who has since gained critical acclaim and a cult following. When Miyazaki eventually took the helm, he became compelled to change the story based on his contempt for the Iraq War which went on at the time. As a result, he inserted anti-war and pro-compassion themes, which absolutely were not part of the original novel. There was no war conflict in the book, yet a large part of this film is this newly shoved-in conflict. The film starts out as Sophie being cursed by the Witch of the Waste to become old. It slowly devolves into vague, unexplained plot elements loosely tied together with a flimsy piece of string. Howl was originally a vain coward, yet here he is a fragile yet suave emo boy, a pillar of morals, determined to stop this devastating conflict. This film's villain, Madame Suleiman, was two different characters in the book, neither of them villains. Miyazaki's determination to have a warlord as the antagonist came at the expense of the Witch of the Waste, a much more intimidating and interesting bad guy. Suleiman isn't even an interesting villain on her own, as not only are her motivations unclear, we never really get a sense of what this war is and why it's even happening. We rarely actually see it go on, and when we do, it's this vague mass of fire and smoke. The film insists Sophie and Howl fell in love at some point, yet for the life of me I don't know why and how. I suppose it's this message of compassion Miyazaki wanted to put in the film. Who cares why they love each other, they just do. It's clear these characters were supposed to be different, yet the film forcefully pushes them in another direction. Beyond the unclear war stuff, there's a myriad of other elements which the characters somehow seem to understand. The story insists is perfectly natural and makes sense, but as an audience member I have no idea what the fuck is happening. Like how this fire thing, Calcifer, is somehow in control of the actual literal heart of Howl, I think. There's time travel in this movie for like one scene. Time travel is never mentioned before, and yet Sophie seems to understand and accept what's going on. The animation too. While it's up to the Miyazaki standard in many aspects, the CG in this movie really sticks out. I am honestly reminded of Tales from Earthsea by this movie. Both are fantasy stories which seem to insist they are coherent and make sense rather than, actually being that. The main reason why I think Howl's Moving Castle is way more beloved is because it's more imaginative. The time travel scene is distractingly out of place in this film, yet if it were in a different movie, it could have been an incredibly satisfying emotional payoff. The castle, its design, and its mechanics are all incredibly creative. There's an entire catalog's worth of charming side characters. There's part of this film I absolutely adore, like the scene where Hal freaks out about his messed up hair dye. I guess a piece of residue from what he was in the book. I love the scene on the stairs. Not only is it incredibly well animated and hilarious, it's a great way to humanize the Witch of the Waste. The animation and soundtrack are also better than in Earthsea. There's an amazing film hidden here somewhere, but the same applies for Earthsea. It's just that the film hidden in Howl's Moving Castle is better than the one hidden in Earthsea, if that makes sense. Whatever. All I want is a film that intentionally rivals Primer in terms of complexity. Studio Ghibli is known for its strange creative imagery, but in my opinion at least, this is easily the weirdest movie they've ever made. Ponyo is loosely inspired by Hans Christian Andersen's The Little Mermaid, except I'm pretty sure the book didn't have anybody that looks like my boy Fujimoto over here. In objective terms, this isn't a good movie, mainly due to its story structure. It's another victim of Miyazaki's work method, starting with the storyboards and sort of having the actual plot form as things move along. This results in very strange decisions and a whole lot of loose ends. The story is about Ponyo, a fish, escaping her father who imprisoned her. She meets Sosuke, a 5-year-old boy, and licks his injury. Now that she did that, it somehow means she can transform into a human. She then uses her dad's stash of magic potions to escape a second time, and it disrupts the natural balance of the world, and the moon will crash into the earth, and it's just a big clusterfuck. But a fun one. You never learn why Fujimoto imprisoned his daughter, who exactly he is, and he even mentions wanting to fight the human race, but that's not a thing that comes back. This is all just a part of the movie's environmental message, because it's not a Miyazaki movie if there's no flight or environmental message. The story should have been about Ponyo escaping and her father trying to bring her back, but there's this big threat that's going to destroy humanity. But everyone's pretty nonchalant about being in mortal danger. There's this weird part at the end where Ponyo's parents and Sosuke's mom are now testing their love, and the world will be saved only if their love is true. Also the baby scene. I don't know if it was supposed to make me feel like my personal space was being invaded, but that's the result. Miyazaki just threw a bunch of ideas and concepts in a blender, clearly. But it's also a big part of its charm. I will completely admit, some of the weird world building, like Ponyo somehow being able to transform from licking blood, is clearly just a device to advance the story. I mean, on the level of The Cat Returns, but The Cat Returns didn't have this visual. The story is bad, admittedly, but this is a big guilty pleasure for me, just for the sheer energy and creativity. It's constantly moving along, there's constantly something weird happening. It's gonna be something to watch with your kids or drunk with your college buddies. Maybe it's just nostalgia? As a kid I remember constantly seeing this movie's trailer on TV. It's strangely a big part of my childhood even though I never saw it as a kid, but maybe it's not my own personal experience that makes me feel like a kid again while watching this. Tales from Earthsea is also a giant mess, but that film is very subdued. The story can't join hands with the madness to form a unique experience, they're stuck with each other. It's kind of stupid, but I really wouldn't have it any other way. The next two entries are going to be somewhat strange. While I think they're technically better than Ponyo, I enjoy Ponyo a lot more and find it to be more interesting. While their flaws don't have the capacity to ruin a movie, like how Ponyo and Hal's flaws ruin stuff like Earthsea and The Cat Returns, that also makes these movies way less interesting. The first time I watched Teriyeti was something like a year ago. I wanted something simple and easily digestible to watch, so I picked what I knew would be one of the lighter Ghibli films. I thought it was good. Rewatching it for this video, however, was a challenge, one I decided I don't really need to complete. This film is higher than Ponyo because as a story it functions better, has better structure, has better pace, things like that. I am a big structure guy, in case you couldn't tell. If something doesn't add anything to the story, makes things needlessly complicated, or is transparently just there to advance the story without blending in naturally, I'm going to be more critical of it than other people. This film is an adaptation of The Borrowers, which has many other adaptations and is about tiny people living in a house, trying to steal the regular-sized resident stuff without getting caught. I love the first borrowing scene where Teriyeti and her father have to steal some supplies from the human family. The sound design is really what makes it, but that's the only true strength this movie has. The villain wants the tiny people roaming around the house out of there just because the film needed a villain. The sick boy is like Marnie, this boringly perfect supposed love interest, but to be fair towards Marnie, she actually portrayed emotion. Even the idea of tiny people living in a house, it's not very well utilized. There are clever little details of how the main character's home is designed, but for the most part there aren't any unique and memorable set pieces or even any world building. How did they steal the huge amount of stuff in their house without being noticed, for example? This is from the same writing duo as Poppy Hill and it really shows. Aside from maybe Teriyeti's design in her home, there isn't anything memorable about this movie. The director isn't Goro, but Hiromasa Yonebayashi, the same director as Marnie. He actually worked as an animator on prior Ghibli films, so he's a sensible choice for director, and this film does look pretty good. Not as good as Marnie, but still decent. The film hinged on the writing though, which despite being partially by Miyazaki, the film somehow ends up being like a Miyazaki ripoff. Cue this interview again, yada yada yada. You see what I mean? It's kind of painful for me to put this above Ponyo. It's the weird world of guilty pleasures, I guess. Oh well, we can't always get what we want, even if we're the sole person responsible for getting it. Here we have Studio Ponyo's debut, Mary and the Witch's Flower. Ponyo was founded by Yoshiaki Nishimura, producer of The Tale of Princess Kaguya, and when Marnie was there, he later recruited the director of the latter. Hence, we have this movie, which Yonebayashi directed. Let's get the obvious thing out of the way. This film looks absolutely beautiful. It's smooth, vibrant, colorful, and highly detailed. There's so many wild presentation decisions that didn't necessarily need to be there, but they're not distracting and only end up being incredibly impressive. It makes the film's universe enchanting, wonderful, and strangely inviting. It looks exactly like a Ghibli movie in all of the right ways. Oh, and before I forget, no, this isn't a Kiki's Delivery Service ripoff. Witches that have brooms and black cats are tropes. Using the same tropes does not a ripoff make. The logo is a different issue though. Animation aside, how's the actual story? This is where things get somewhat rough. People seem apathetic towards the movie. This is probably because this film very closely adheres to a formula that a lot of other movies meant to appeal to kids also do. We have our main character. They are living the life that they consider average until something really unique and or crazy happens which sends them on a wild adventure to save the world. They probably meet a new, wacky cast of characters and or have a love interest. Maybe they get exposed as a liar/sham, and they have to prove themselves to said wacky cast of characters. There's a low point in the transition between the second and third act, but it gives the hero the determination to go out there and defeat the big baddie, becoming a better version of themselves in the process. It's the formula that people made fun of the Emoji Movie for adhering to so incredibly closely, only because it wanted to appeal to as many people as possible so it could sell them stuff. Good movies use it too, because it's a decent formula that works. There's often a variety of interesting characters and locations, there's always an appropriate and pronounced threat, the main character often experiences a satisfying growth. It's a formula specifically designed to put you in the main character's shoes. These films often get critical praise because it's as if you're actually the one who went on this grand adventure. You're not going to rate The Adventure of a Lifetime a simple 3.5 stars on Letterboxd for mediocre characterization, are you? Most people won't. That formula works here too. The setting is incredibly creative and interesting, the character growth is very satisfying, Mary herself is right up there with so many of the iconic Ghibli heroines for me. Yet, it has issues with its execution that other films don't. These other films often have a very important threat, or an intimidating villain. The same can't be said for this movie's villains. This film has its own version of the Liar Revealed storyline. The one in Over the Hedge, Megamind, Shark Tale, Madagascar 3, a lot of DreamWorks movies actually. However, Mary only fools the villains, not any friendly character, which makes the villains seem less intimidating since they're so easily tricked. Their motivation is way too vague, and while they definitely do bad things and put specific people in danger, the story attempts to be grand in the same way the Lego Movie or Spider-Verse are. Villains which only put like 2 people and a lot of animals in danger don't really belong here. I said attempt because while this film follows a formula usually reserved for large-scale films, there really are only 2 locations, Mary's house and its surrounding area, and the magic school. A large part of the film takes place in this magic school, yet Mary never has a conversation with any of the students. When shit really hits the fan, they seem to just disappear. They aren't seen, mentioned, nothing. These issues are usually avoided when sticking to this formula, but since in this instance they weren't, it made people disconnect from the movie and therefore realize how generic it is. Ghibli stands out because it usually doesn't stick to these wildly used templates. They throw conventional structure away for the purpose of imagination. It's not that this film isn't imaginative, it's simply less so. Then again, I completely understand why the decision was made to make this first feature a more safe and less experimental affair. For a first film from a studio, it's not bad, especially in terms of presentation. I enjoyed this movie a lot while watching it. I found it incredibly charming, but at the same time I think people's complaints towards it are completely justified. Also, while Suzuki and Takahata gladly attended a screening for a film made by their friends and former colleagues, Miyazaki said, "Good job," yet refused to actually watch it. I'm not letting my stance on that man go.